Hi and welcome to another spread for the index cards. I decided to do 2 pages at once. So one I'm using alphabetical and numeral background, and the other I'm using circles. So I start by choosing items to go into the background. So adding some for finding the colours I'd like to work with, and I've chosen brown and yellow for the numeral background. So I'll grab some distress inks and my numeral background, and I do a stencil on there just to add a bit of depth. I've already gessoed the pages. I done this off and let it actually dry for a couple of days before I've started this project. So there's the numerical background, and I think it came out well, and I've done the different shadings from the yellow to the brown, which actually mixed in quite well. All the colours and tools I've used will be on the blog. So now I'm using purple and pink colour just to add some. This will be the colours that I will use for the circles. So using the circle stencil, I've added the distress ink to the background here. Now I've gotten the archival ink, and I'm adding some circles stamped with using a little jar, and added some darker circles to the background. And on the numerical one, I've just adding some lettering, plus I'll add the word believe at the bottom, just to, as I felt that added to the information that I wanted for the page. Now I'm going to add some layering to the page, grabbing some papers to use. So on the circles I add some music paper, and on the numerical and number I use some handwriting to add some background. So also I've used some papers that I used from a die cut, and it adds a circular background to it as well. So I'll use some gel medium and add these to the page. And I've used a gloss gel. It doesn't matter what sort of gel you're using, it's just to get the items to stay where I want them. So I place the die cut lettering as well, and I don't use them as standard lettering. Some are back to front, some are upside down and angling. This is just to create some depth but with recognisable shaping in the background. So once that's all gelled down, I'll move on to the next page. It's a lot harder sometimes to work with 2 pages, but it's a bit of a challenge, and I thought I'd have a bit of fun. And as they're only small surfaces, it worked quite well, I felt. Now, one thing I did realise as I progress, and you'll see where I correct it, I should have gessoed those cardboard circles, as it created an issue in the colouring of the page when I actually do add the other next layer of colouring. So once these are all gelled down, I actually found some smaller circles, and I added those as well, just to add some size differences. So I will actually dry these off in a second, and then I will go on to the next stage. So now the pages are dried, I actually added the Ranger item that actually seals the Distress ink so it actually doesn't blend into the background. And now I'm going to add some clear gesso to the page to give some grip to the next layer of colouring. So I gessoed the whole page on both of them, and as you see, I've actually used the gesso and created also on the circles some texture by not doing a smooth drying. So now I've dried both pages, and I'm going to add some modelling paste to add again another layer. So on the numerical of actually adding some shaping which is square, which to me, because of the lines, works really well with the numeral alphabetical idea for this page. So it'll add some depth there. And on the circles I add a dotted stencil to go with the actual subject. And it's often a little bit harder to work one-handed when you're holding the stencil down, but I felt they came out quite well. So now these will get dried off and I will start on them, and I'm going to use the Magicals from Lindy Gangs, and I've chosen two colours for both. On one is the pink and the purple, and the other is the browns. So I'll start on the circles, and I will sprinkle on the darker colour and then the lighter colour, then spray with water to activate the Magicals. Now this is where I found I'd made the mistake, and you can see I actually hadn't gessoed completely, and you can see the changing in the colours, but because they're so dark and they're of a totally different shade to what I was after, it really stands out and it really doesn't quite work with what I was trying to achieve. So this is where I've realised the mistake. So I dried them right off, and I will grab some white titanium paint from Golden, and I actually use a brush and add them to all the circly surfaces where I can actually see the browns. And it's fun, it actually blends in some of the colour, but that is fine, it adds another texture to the background. So in a way the mistake was a positive, and often there's no mistakes in any sort of mixed media. You just work around and find a solution. So often it's like a MacGyverism when you're finding little errors that you hadn't realised previously. So that I'll let dry off a little bit naturally, and I will come back to that later. So now I'm working on the lettering one, and I add the yellow and the brown sprayed on, trying to keep the darker colour at the top and the lighter colours at the bottom. Now where I create a bit of green, I've actually removed it, as that's not a colour that I really want on the page. So I just remove that with a wet wipe as required, and I add a bit more spray, and I'm drying it and trying to spread the colouring where I'm after it, and just drying and repeating as required. I actually think the brown colouring actually turned out quite well, and you just never know what's going to happen with this type of spray colour range. You're not as in control of where it goes as you are if you're painting it by hand. But I love how these work, and I love the shimmer that's actually in these colours. And I'll just keep using the heat tool to move and dry the surfaces, and to try to get the different shadings you can get with the dry and wet of these beautiful colours. As I'm drying this off, I realised I could add some more white, so I actually grabbed the white container and added a little bit of white just to add a little bit of depth to this, and blended it in to try to lighten the bottom of the actual card. And tapping some of the colours off does help. Changes the shading. Where you keep the inks will actually dry deeper where you've left it. So now I'll finish up on the purple, dry off the paint that I'd let start drying naturally, and I'll just finish that off so it doesn't mix with this. And I've added again some white on this page just to lighten up the top right corner, and I'll work some more colours in. So this is the next day, and I've got these are fully dry. I just recut the circles for the rings out. There's just a little bit overlaying of it, and tidy those up. So now I'm going to decide what I'm going to do with a focal point on each of them, but also I just want to highlight the letters and highlight the circles. So I'm using a Ecoline brush in black, which is also a watercolour, and it will highlight each of the lettering, adding some water. Sorry about that movement of the camera there, I'm not sure what happened. So I'm just looking for my water brush, and I will blend the dark of the black through and see what I gain from here. Looking back, I could see where I could have stopped, but it's one of those things you play with when you're working with mixed media. Sometimes you go over and you've got to keep going forward to get the next stage of the happiness that you want to gain from the item. And I needed to bring back, I realised, some more white, so I've actually added some white to a little squeeze bottle, and very hard with powder and these little squeeze, but I was able to add a bit to it to get myself a little funnel to actually do that a little bit easier. So I just make up a little white of the magical, and I add a few white highlights. This is where I realised I made the mistake, but you can't go back, you can't take away those items, so you've got to work forward to find a solution. But overall, I like the page, and I just keep working until I'm happy with that. And sorry it went off screen a little as I was playing with it. That often happens. And where the iPad is, you can't actually correct it without causing issue with the recording anyway. So that's the page almost done. So now I'm adding the black to the purple page, and I will work on this until I find a happy medium with this. The brown page, I'm not so happy with the top right middle. Kind of lost some of the depth and colour there, but I'll fix that when I add some focal points. So now that's all dry, and I just clean a little bit of a spot, and I've cut out a butterfly, and I'm just adding some the sparkly clear onto the butterfly and trying to work out how I'm going to lay that. So I found some lettering that I cut out, and I set that aside thinking that would be how I'll work it. And so now I'm trying to find some focal point for the purple. So I found the blackbird from Kazaz that I had, and I'm now looking at some floral. I found the white one was just too big for the page, or didn't work with the page. So now I'm just having a look through my stash for something that would work here. So I found some smaller flowering florals, and looking through, I still wasn't quite happy with it, so I kept on looking through my thing. So sorry about the dead air that's here. I forgot to cut it out when I was doing the video editing. But I found this lovely, beautiful, big, dark purple flower, and I felt that worked really well. And I had a pink embellishment that I had for a Marta Labrowski, I'll say the name wrong, Marta from Marima's Small Art project, and I added that to the flowers. The yellow centre just didn't quite work, so I've actually glued that with some of the accents there onto page, and I used the gel medium to glue the flower on, and also the blackbird that was glued on with the glue there. So I've just set that aside, and that one is almost finished, and I just now will find some wording to add to the page. So I've cut that out, and I will add that to the top of the page. As you see, and that will be added and set down on top. And I actually added the gloss over the top just to highlight it a little bit more. I'll set that aside, and now I'm working on the brown, and I'm just going to add some black around the edging just to highlight the bird. I had to dry the bird off because I used too much of the glitter wink, and as I said, I'll add the actual items I used, the tools I used for this project on my blog page. I'm still trying to work out how to add it to the descriptions on YouTube. Everything's learned. I actually decided not to use any background paper, and I've just added the bird with some thick tape just to make it stand up a bit more. And I made sure I used another glue to stick the bird down on top of the glue that's there. And I decided to use black with white writing for this particular layout, and I'm just going through some Ranger wording to decide on what I've used here. So basically these pages are almost complete. I've just glued that down, and I'm actually going to add some of the gloss or accent onto butterfly across the body of it, just to allow that to stand out. And I just signed my name and the date I finished it. and I'm happy with both projects. Thank you for following me on YouTube. I know it's only a small following as yet, but got to start somewhere. So here's my final. So never doubt your instinct with one. The other exists to be happy, not to impress. So I hope you're happy with these, and thank you for visiting my YouTube channel. Please subscribe and take care.